This is the Honda Civic and this is the Toyota Corolla. They are both among the very best hybrid cars that you can buy. But which one is best? In this review, we're comparing them in every key area and we're picking a winner. But before we start, if you want to see lots more new car reviews, reveals and comparisons like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And for a great saving on both of these cars and many, many more, go to whatcar.com. First, a quick recap on what exactly these cars are. So we have here the Civic, which was released last year, and we already know it's a fantastic hybrid car. It's good to drive, it's practical, it's nice inside. We've got the 2-litre petrol hybrid engine, which is the only engine you can get with the Civic, unless you go for the hot hatch Civic Type R. But for this test, we've got the regular car with the 2-litre hybrid in mid-spec sport trim. This is the 12th generation Toyota Corolla, and it was released a few years ago now, but it's just had a facelift to freshen it up. Admittedly, in the styling department, the changes are pretty minimal. There's a tweaked headlight design, there's this new mesh grille pattern, there's a couple of new wheel designs, and there's some new paint options as well. But more importantly, it's had a power hike, the battery's bigger, and the interior is improved as well. With the Corolla, you have a choice of 1.8 or 2-litre hybrid setups. We're in the cheaper, less powerful 1.8 in GR Sport trim, which is one step down from the range-topping version of this car. And if you do want to find out more about the differences between the old Corolla and the new one, then click on the link to watch our review. What we're doing here is focusing more on the comparisons between the Civic and the Corolla. So we'll start with the Civic interior, and really you've got a sound driving position in this and a nice, simple, tidy layout to things. It all feels really good quality. You've got a nice mix of materials, and there's some really nice attention to detail in here as well, like the honeycomb dashboard that you have here, the knurling on these very nicely damped climate controls, and it all just feels and looks very nice indeed. It might not be as plush as a 1 Series, but it's pretty much as good as anything else. The truth is, the Corolla doesn't look quite as fancy inside as the Civic, but it is just as well built. And you've still got a really nice mix of materials with some soft touch on the dashboard there, and all the buttons and dials are still really nicely damped. It just doesn't quite have the same sort of visual appeal that the Civic has. What you do get in the Corolla as well is a slightly higher driving position. So if you prefer the lower down, sportier feel that you have in the Civic, which is also helped by the fact you've got a higher center console in there, in the Corolla, you're higher up off the ground with a slightly better view down the road, but really that comes down to personal preference, whether you think one is better than the other. What you do get in the Corolla as well is a fully digital 12.3-inch driver display as standard, but in the Civic you get a part digital display and you need to go for advanced trim to get a fully digital one. When it comes to infotainment, the Corolla's new 10.5-inch touchscreen is a big improvement on the previous models. It's bigger, the menus are clearer, and it now, finally, comes with wireless phone mirroring. There's shortcuts down the left side of the screen, so hopping between menus is relatively easy, and the icons are a good size. However, the volume buttons are pretty small and fiddly, and the screen is slower to respond to inputs than the Civic system. The Civic's 9-inch touchscreen might be a bit smaller, but it's easier to use, with handy physical shortcut keys close to the driver and a dial for some audio functions. The screen is slightly easier to see too, and the system generally works smoothly. Now the truth is, neither of these cars are that great when it comes to rear seat space. And the problem is that they're both a bit stingy when it comes to rear seat headroom, at least by the standards of the family car class. So when it comes to legroom, the Civic is very good and in fact better than what you find in the Corolla. So even if you're over 6 foot, there's loads of legroom. It's very easy to stretch out sat in these rear seats here. But if you are an adult and you want to put your head on the headrest, then you'll find that headroom isn't particularly great in these rear seats. In the back of the Corolla, headroom is slightly better than what you have in the Civic, but still not amazing by the standards of the family car class. But you can see legroom is much stingier than what's on offer in the back of the Civic. So both of these cars are in my driving position, and sat behind them, I had loads of space in the Civic, and now I've got hardly any in the back of this Corolla. You've also got really tight footwells down here as well, so it can even mean getting in and out is just a bit fiddly and awkward. So overall, the Civic is better when it comes to accommodating adults in the rear seats. But both of these cars have very good boots by class standards. So in total, you can fit 6 carry-on size suitcases into both of them. And even though with the Civic, it's got a slightly sloping, sportier roofline at the back, it still has a very good boot. The Corolla is very, very similar and also very impressive, particularly by class standards. Be careful which version of the Corolla you go for if boot space is important to you. The 2-litre hybrid model has less luggage space than even some small cars like the Skoda Fabia and VW Polo. That's because its larger engine means there's not enough space for the car's 12-volt battery under the bonnet. So Toyota has put it under the boot floor instead. So the interiors are quite hard to split. The Civic perhaps looks a bit nicer inside. It's got more rear seat space, but when it comes to boot space, they're very, very similar. And it's the same story for fuel economy as well. Now, we mentioned at the start that they're both hybrid cars, but they go about being hybrid cars in slightly different ways. The hybrid system in the Civic sees the petrol engine acting as a generator to power the electric motors at low speeds, driving the wheels directly only at high speeds. The Corolla's setup is more conventional because it's the engine which sends power to the wheels most of the time, with assistance from a single electric motor. But the long and short of it is that this 1.8 litre Corolla is very marginally more fuel efficient. In our real world tests, it achieved 50.5 miles per gallon compared to the Civic's 49.5 miles per gallon. Normally, a bigger engine with more power means worse fuel economy than a smaller engine with less power. But in the case of the Corolla, the official economy of the 2-litre version is actually a little bit better than the official economy of the 1.8 litre. In real-world driving conditions though, the difference probably won't be noticeable. So in terms of fuel economy, the two cars are pretty similar. When it comes to pace though, there is a big difference between them. So in the Civic, we managed to do 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.8 seconds, whereas in the 1.8 litre Corolla on the same day in the same conditions, it was 9.6 seconds for the same sprint, so quite a bit slower. If you do go for the 2 litre Corolla, then it gets closer to the Civic in terms of outright pace, but it's still slower ultimately. Now in terms of what the Civic's like on the road, really this is just a great car all round. It's got a fairly firm suspension setup, but it's still comfortable. And it's also got plenty of grip. It's got meaty and precise steering, all of which gives you real confidence when you're driving it. And it's surprisingly good fun to drive. So all round, this is just very impressive to drive and a great family car on the road. The Corolla takes a more relaxed approach to things. So it's softer, and it's more comfortable, and it does really well to isolate you from bumps in the road. Although this GR Sport model isn't the Corolla at its best because it has big 18-inch alloys and the ride definitely isn't as good as the trim levels that have smaller alloys. So if you want the best riding Corolla, make sure you go for the smallest 16-inch alloys if you can. It's also quieter in here than it is in the Civic, but that's only once you're up to speed because the engine in the Corolla is keener to kick in and makes a bit more of a racket when you're accelerating. But then when you're not accelerating, this is smooth, it's quiet, and just generally very relaxing and soothing inside. It's also worth pointing out that in the previous Corolla, the 1.8 was really pretty weedy and felt quite slow, but with the updates to the new model, that definitely isn't the case. So now the 1.8 is much improved from before, and sure, it's not as fast as the Civic, but it's still fast enough. Whichever way you slice it, the Civic is more expensive than the Corolla, but the difference isn't huge. For the Corolla, we wouldn't go for the sportier styled GR Sport that we have on this test, and instead we'd stick with entry-level Icon because it's much cheaper and it comes with lots of standard equipment. For the Civic, we would go for this sport trim that we have in this test because it gets all the necessary standard equipment plus a few luxuries like adaptive cruise control and heated front seats while keeping the price still fairly reasonable. So the latest Corolla is even more recommendable than the already excellent previous Corolla. It's comfortable, it's frugal, it's quiet, but the Civic is better to drive, it's quicker, it's a little more practical, and it's got an even nicer interior. So even though it's a little bit more money, it's ultimately the best family car that you can buy. But the truth is that between these two cars, there really isn't much to split them. So whichever one you go for, you're getting a fantastic hybrid option. For more on both of them, go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great saving on your next car. But before you go, subscribe to our channel to see lots more comparisons, reviews and reveals, and tell us in the comments below which one you prefer.